Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Center for Naval Analyses to talk to Sam Bendett, the man who listens and watches and reads everything to do with Russian unmanned systems. This is our last threat report of the year, Sam, and I have to say, you're looking very Christmassy. I didn't even know you own sweaters because every time I see you, you're in a suit.
It's that time of year, so yes.
That's right, and you guys have a holiday party. You're just exuding Christmas cheer.
Well, thank you.
Let me finish off with something because Russia's got a lot of unmanned developments going on. You're going to update us on that, and also looking a little bit into the new year and what to expect from Russian experimentation, because there are a whole series of programs that they're still pushing ahead on at full speed. We were recently at the Center for New American Security. Paul Shari was the latest report on soldier systems and enhancing soldier lethality. I know there's a big project that's ongoing in DoD, and we had a demonstration from Lockheed Martin also about their exoskeleton suit, and we produced a great video on that, and I commend everybody to watch that. We did that in partnership with CNA. Talk to us a little bit, but you interjected and you had a question, but also gave a little bit of a briefing on what the Russians are doing with exoskeletal technology, and that is basically to augment the ability of soldiers with a powered frame to allow soldiers to carry more, or at least be able to carry what they're carrying farther. Talk to us a little bit about what the state of the art is for Russia at this point.
So there's several designs that they're working on. There's a heavy design that they want to incorporate into the Ratnik personal soldier gear. That's the display that looked like a Starship trooper. Star Wars stormtrooper at the latest Army 2018 Military Expo. So that one has a power pack. That one has to have a lot of sophisticated elements to it in order to ensure that the soldiers are indeed capable of performing much better. There are also kind of intermediate models that they're working on, kind of like a back frame and a leg frame, something similar to what we saw at CNAS. But there are also other designs that they in fact tested in Syria, and that's a light carbon exoskeleton without power packs, without hydraulics, basically something that can help the soldiers right away and could potentially be even a dual-use technology. So that particular light exoskeleton was tested in Syria to great success. Russian military is looking to test it further, and in fact the manufacturer is hoping that the dual-use market would increase to maybe people who do rock climbing, who do outdoor activities, hikers, anybody who needs to carry a lot of weight over specific distance but doesn't have a lot of money to spend to augment their capability.
And we should say, right, the Lockheed Martin system was powered, 8 hours on each battery set, 14 pounds to augment the capability of soldiers. And one of the other things is that it also has, for whether for aged or for older people or for rehabilitation, there is a commercial marketplace they're looking at, as well as, for package centers and things like that, to give people a little bit more lifting capability. Let's talk about Carnivore, which is, you just have to love the Russian messaging on these things, right? Carnivore, drone. Let's start there. What's the newest thing? Because we've got a whole list of things that we're going to be going over. So give us an update on Carnivore.
So that specific drone was developed to target other drones. It's supposed to shoot nets and target smaller quadricopters and smaller UAVs. It's also supposed to drop various small-scale explosives. That's something that Russians probably developed based on their experience in Syria, when they encountered a lot of adversary commercial off-the-shelf quadricopters that were turned into lethal devices. So Russians are very keen on developing various counter-UAS technologies, and Carnivore UAV is one of those technologies.
And then there's also the Arctic drone, right? Again, good messaging on the part of Russians, which look at Arctic. I mean, there was also the new icebreaker program that they announced as well, which I thought was interesting. At a very time we were zeroing our or reducing our icebreaker spending. Talk to us a little bit about the Arctic program.
So a very specific design for the Arctic. In fact, Russians have been advertising their unmanned systems, both ground and air, as working in a variety of temperatures. So they usually say it can work anywhere from like -20, -30 degrees up to +40 degrees Celsius. So anywhere from Arctic conditions to desert conditions. And this particular drone was developed as an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance drone for the Arctic. One important thing about this Arctic drone and Carnivore is that they can actually operate without GPS, so they can operate in an EMS contested environment, something that Russians are also working on. The government has spoken a lot about the need to augment their monitoring capabilities in the Arctic. A lot of borders, a lot of territory, not a lot of assets. So unmanned systems, especially UAVs, are key in such monitoring in such a significant maritime domain. So having a UAV that is built specifically for the Arctic is a big plus for the Russian military, as well as its civilian sector, such as the extractive industries, the oil and gas, and the shipping.
We should point out, right, that precision navigation starts to become a problem at the poles. So actually working on very, very good inertial and other systems are what's absolutely key, and then that gives you an edge, obviously, in a contested magnetic environment. Talk to us a little bit about deliveries, right? 2018 was a very, very important year. Again, operations, operational validation that happened in Syria and operations elsewhere. And Russia has been moving very, very aggressively, perhaps taking advantage of a U.S. reluctance to export some of its systems because of missile technology control regime and other reasons that both Russia and China have sort of expanded into the marketplace. Talk to us a little bit about what the delivery picture looked like in 2018.
So one significant factor that Russians encountered in Syria was their lack of long-range UAVs for ISR target acquisitions and maybe combat missions. So we're talking about MALE and HALE UAVs, medium altitude, long endurance, high altitude, long endurance drones. So this week there have been a number of announcements from the Ministry of Defense, from Defense Minister Shoigu, about the fact that Russia will start acquiring ISR and target acquisition as well as combat drones starting in 2019, and they listed specific platforms. Shoigu also said that Russian military will start acquiring 300 short-range UAVs every year for a number of years starting with 2019. So the number of UAVs across the military will increase, and the number of trainings and the number of exercises and drills involving UAVs will also increase. So we're going to start seeing a significant incorporation of unmanned aerial vehicle technology into Russian concept of operations.
Talk to us a little bit about Okhotnik, right? There's a whole bunch of programs that are going to be in the pipeline. 2019 is going to be a key role for them. Talk about Okhotnik and give the audience a little description about what Okhotnik is and where it fits into this vast tapestry of Russian unmanned systems.
So almost a decade ago, Russians unveiled this concept for a UAV. It was supposed to be the stealthy flying wing concept, similar to an American and Western X-47. It was supposed to have a stealthy design. It was supposed to have a jet engine. It was supposed to fly far and fly high. Now, a lot of these programs that I will mention had their delivery and testing plans pushed all the way to the right for a variety of reasons. Funding, lack of technology, lack of expertise. So Okhotnik, or Hunter, is supposed to be a combat UAV built along stealth lines. So in September, Russians actually, I think it was in October, Russians tested that UAV for the first time. They've accelerated it on an airport launch pad. So they saw whether or not it could actually, whether the engine could work. So next year they're promising that this UAV will actually take to the air sometime in the spring. Now that UAV is supposed to carry a variety of missiles and other armaments, but the key component is that it's supposed to have stealthy characteristic. There are also a number of other programs. So Altius, a UAV design, which was supposed to have been Russia's longest ranged and heaviest UAV, was designed to carry 2 tons of cargo over a distance of like 10,000 kilometers. Well, the schedule for that UAV has been pushed all the way to the right. There have been significant delays and significant problems at the production facility where this UAV was designed. So MOD, Ministry of Defense, stepped in, took that project out of that one design bureau and handed it over to another subcontractor. And Russians today are claiming that Altius will also be flight tested next year. 2 years ago, Russians unveiled medium altitude long endurance drone named Orion. It was also unveiled in 2018 Army Expo as well. And Russians today are saying that that UAV will start getting into the military in 2019 as well. Finally, there are several other UAVs that Russians have been testing, Katran and Korsar. These have been shown at the May Day parade at the May 9th military parade, and Russians are
Celebrating the end of the Great Patriotic War.
Correct. And Russians are also stating that these UAVs will start showing up in the Russian military in 2019. And finally, Russia's longest ranged UAV up until now was a four-post, which was an Israeli drone that Russians have been assembling. And that drone flies at a distance of about 250 kilometers. So Russians were keen to Russify that design and to turn it into a combat drone. So this Russified version of an Israeli four-post, which Russians acquired about, I think, 6 or 7 years ago, will also make an appearance in 2019, and it will be a combat drone as well. So Russians are looking at a variety of models that will fill the gap in the combat long-range endurance amongst their unmanned fleets.
And briefly on ground systems, Russia has also been very, very active on ground as well as sea systems. Give us a little quick of a thumbnail sketch on what we should expect on ground vehicles and what should we expect on sea systems.
So on ground vehicles, Russian military again has been stating that certain designs that proved themselves in Syria will be acquired by the Russian military. So that involves Uran-6 demining UGV. It involves Sphere and Scarab, small-scale UGVs for demining that the Russian sappers have tested. There have also been examples of other UGVs that Russian military has been testing and has announced that it is interested in acquiring, like a Nerechta and many others. And when it comes to surface and underwater vehicles, Russians have been working on no less than 17 maritime unmanned vehicle designs. That is, again, according to official statements from the Russian military-industrial sector and the government. So we're going to see a range of UUV and USVs first tested and then possibly acquired by the Navy. The big issue there is what the Russians call import substitution. So until recently, a lot of these maritime unmanned systems have been imported from Western partners. Because of various sanctions and internal politics, Russians want to field completely domestically built designs. So we're going to see more of those.
And all of the sanctions, I mean, it's interesting because when we were in Halifax, we talked to Rafal Rohozinski of SecDev, and one of the things, a prominent cyber firm, and one of the things he said is that the sanctions, the negative part of the sanctions is that it has hyper-accelerated Russian investment and development of cyber capabilities, right, as well as unmanned. That's certainly the case in unmanned also, isn't it?
Well, sanctions have accelerated a lot of sectors of the Russian economy and industry that have been either underinvested, mismanaged, or were laying dormant. So now that the Russian government and the Ministry of Defense says that we need to have all domestic production, there's great impetus for the Russian high-tech domestic industry to get its basically act together. And let's face it, despite all the issues that Russian military and industry has experienced over the past couple of decades, it is still one of the most advanced technological nations in the world. And so Russian high-tech sector and its defense sector can in fact step up to a certain extent and fill that gap with import-substituted technology.
Sam Bendett here at the Center for Naval Analyses. Always a pleasure. Hope you have great holidays.
Thank you.
Good New Year, and look forward to working together in 2019.
Likewise, and look forward to more tapings like this. Thanks.